Okay, so we're going to talk about aperture or f-stop. They're basically the same thing, and what it is the variable opening in your lens that allows light to reach the sensor or film. It's measured in f-stops. Why they call it f-stops, I don't know, but it's measured from smallest to largest inversely. The biggest number, f22, it has a teeny weeny little hole. F1 has the biggest hole, and it's expensive. If you have a lens that's a aperture of 1, most lenses fall between a 3.5 and a 22. Lenses are measured by the widest aperture that they'll open up to. And for instance, this lens, you can see the aperture, which is that hole going through the lens where the light goes through, is all the way open. And right now that's at 2.8 for this lens. When you close it, it shuts it down. And on this lens, the smallest it goes to is 22. So you open it back up, there's 16, 11, 8, 5.6, 4.5, 3.5, and so on. And then you're at 2.8, which is the widest. And that allows the most light in. A fast lens is not quick, not speedy necessarily. What those are is it allows a lot of light in and helps you catch motion. So a fast lens is any lens with an f-stop, the widest aperture possible, in the 2.8 to the 1.0 range. And that's considered a fast lens. So when you look at your lens, there's some numbers on there that kind of tell you what you're dealing with. For instance, this is a Canon lens, and if you look around, there's some numbers on the side. And right here, well, if I can get it in focus, it's a Canon lens, and it tells you it's an EF, and that means what kind of body it'll fit. The focal length is 85 millimeters. That's from the front lens to the sensor on the camera back here where it screws in. The f-stop of the aperture is measured in a 1 with a semicolon to 1.8. It's probably easier to see. I'd hand drew these. This lens, for instance, is a 35 to 80 focal length, and its aperture is a 1 with a semicolon. That means 1, 2, or 1 against 4 to 5.6 aperture. Don't worry about the 1. Doesn't mean anything as far as what you need to know where your aperture widest point is. This lens here is the 85 1.8, and on the side of the lens it shows focal length of 85 with the widest possible aperture of 1.8. This lens is a Mamiya film lens, and its aperture, if I can get it in the light and on focus, says 1 to 2.8. And just to confuse things even more, it says F equals 80 millimeters. Well, that's not f-stop, that's focal length. So maybe that's one of the reasons people now talk about aperture of your lens. What's the widest aperture? Instead of F for focal length and f-stop for aperture, and all the numbers and the terms just get so confusing. The two main numbers you need to be concerned about with your lens is the focal length, which is how long the lens is considered to be. This one is an 80 millimeter. This one is an 85 millimeter. You notice they're very different in length. Even without the cap on this one, they're still almost half as, this one's almost half as big as this one lengthwise. It's considered the length from the front lens to the film or to the sensor, which sits back here when this snaps in the camera. Since this one is a zoom lens, the aperture or f-stop is very important. In this one, it's like this here. It has a variable aperture. So it's 4 to 5.6. So the widest that lens can function when it's all the way retracted is 4. So you have an f4 lens. When it's extended all the way, it's a 5.6. So the same lens, whether it's zoomed out or zoomed in, lets in either the amount of light of a setting of 4 or the amount of light with a setting of 5.6. Okay. Why is f-stop so important? And why all these different numbers? Why can't you just have one that shuts it down and one that opens it up? Everything about taking pictures is light. Every photograph you have is dependent on how much light. Each change in aperture allows twice as much light to enter the lens. Doesn't make any sense because the numbers are not numerical in order. 22, 16, 11, 8, 5.6, 4.5, 4, 3.5. Huh? Who came up with this stuff? I don't know. Just know that when you switch from 22 to 16, you've allowed twice as much light to enter the lens or to enter your camera sensor. So when you get down to the fast end of the lens, the 2.8 to 2.0, 1.8, each time you step down, you're allowing in twice as much light. When you zoom and you go from a light setting of 4.0 to 5.6, whether you zoom or not, and we'll touch more on this later, you're actually cutting your light in half by 4 times, going from zoomed all the way in to zoomed all the way out, because you take one doubling here and then you double again to go to here. F-stop, it's all about light.